Welcome everyone to the Arts Vote ATL District Forums. Today we have got District 3 joining us. So candidates who are running for City Council for District 3 will be talking about arts and culture in Atlanta and just getting their thoughts on this part of the platform. For those of you in the audience, we do have the Q&A feature available today. So as you listen and think of a question, please feel free to drop it using that Q&A feature, and we will answer those questions towards the end of the hour. But go ahead and drop them in there while they're still fresh on your mind. I don't think I said this, which is my mistake. I'm Collins DeSell, and I am a volunteer with Arts Vote ATL, and we are just a group of arts administrators and artists and just general citizens who care about the arts who've come together to organize this series of forums. Several of them have happened or are happening this week. The mayoral forum was last week, and that was the same group put that on, and then there'll be other districts forums happening throughout the month of October, so be on the lookout for those dates. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Natalie Holly. Natalie is the current Director of Development at Actors Express, which is in the heart of District 3. She is relatively new to Atlanta, moving here from the New York area. And so thrilled to have her in Atlanta, have her in District 3. When she's not raising money for arts and culture, she's also a freelance writer. So you may have read some of her pieces in I think South by Southwest was one, the Haitian Times, kind of all over the place. You will see Natalie's byline. So very excited to have both an artist and arts administrator leading us today. All of the District 3 candidates were invited and to join us here today. And we have Erica Estrada is joining us, as well as Kiona Jones and Elijah Porter. The other, Ken Wainwright did not get back to us, and Byron and Brandon just were not able to join us today. This session is going to be recorded, and without further ado, Natalie, please take it away.
Collins, so sorry. Before you do, Natalie, Byron just popped in.
Oh, wonderful.
And is now with us in the session.
Oh, but Byron, welcome. I'm so sorry. I didn't see you there. I got too busy talking. Byron Amos is also joining us. Byron, we had talked about going in alphabetical order by last name, but since you're just joining us, we're going to make you. We'll put you after Elijah. So we'll go when we're answering the questions. We'll go Erica, Kiona, Elijah, and then Byron, please feel free to jump in with your answers. Natalie is going to give you a little 30-second hand wave when you've got about 30 seconds left to finish your thought. So really, without further ado this time, Natalie, it's all yours.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you so much for that, Collins. All right, I'm going to jump right into the first question. What ways do you see that the arts and culture community could be leveraged to improve the quality of life for residents in District 3?
And so I will go first. I'll give Mr. Amos a break. I am Erica Estrada. I'm a candidate for Atlanta City Council District 3. Thank you all for hosting us today. And with that first question, I live in the Castleberry Hill neighborhood, which is split into 2 districts, and District 3 is one of them. But I particularly, one of my deciding factors in somewhere to live was to be near the arts community. So Castleberry Hill is a part of that. But really quickly on that, there are so many ways: youth engagement, civic engagement. There are different programming options we can do when it comes to how the arts community is benefiting District 3 as a whole. I just specifically see things we can do around partnerships, and these are paid partnerships. Of course, we must value our arts community as we do other communities, but beautification is definitely one, working with artists and artists' minds on ways that we can beautify our district, outdoors and indoors.
Wonderful, thank you for that. Would that be Elijah Porter, who's next. I'm sorry, I don't remember the order.
Kiana, I'm next. Yeah. And you did say 2 minutes or a minute? We have a limit of 2 minutes for answering?
That's correct. 2 minutes for answering. And I want to welcome Brandon Graham, who also just joined in. So going forward, we'll have Kiona, then Elijah, then Byron, then Brandon.
Okay, thank you so much for this opportunity, and thank you for allowing me to answer this question. I believe that partnerships should be leveraged, public and private. We need to leverage partnerships with our schools, the developers, the philanthropic community, our grassroots organization, businesses, our faith-based organizations, the YMCA, our seniors. There's also a school in District 3 that we should partner with, the Savannah College of Arts and Designs is also a very significant organization in our community in District 3, which is the Center for Puppetry Arts. It's been here for over 40 years. And as far as the D3 plan is concerned, there are key indicators where partnering within the community was also requested in certain sub areas. I'm the only candidate on this panel that's worked with the Grove Park Foundation to secure a $50,000 initial grant in recreating the new Grove Park Theater as MPU chair in 2019. Not only will that facility impact families on the west side, but it'll impact families throughout the city. And a relationship with Kenny Leon and the Fox Theater was forged. I'm the only candidate in this organization that was a part of a committee that wanted to repurpose a APS school, a school that's been closed since 2015. And the name of the program will be CCAT, the Community Center for Arts and Technology, a hub for artists to create, recreate, and showcase their work. I'm the only candidate that's president of my Friends of the Park. We secured an $80,000 grant for a mural erected for a 70-year-old park to memorialize 3 individuals that graduated from Turner High School that integrated UGA, which is Charlene Hunter Galt, Hamilton Holmes, and last person is Dr. Mary Frances Early. And that's how we can improve and forge and leverage relationships within District 3. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. We'll have the next candidate.
Thank you for the question. The cultural enhancement and economic development of our district through the use of arts and culture is so critical. And I want to say that the first thing that we can do to really build and improve the quality of life is what I actually started a little bit earlier last week. It's the Westside Community Festival. By hosting festivals, events, and activities, we create immersive, artistic, cultural experiences where the community can feel engaged and involved and also feel part of what's happening within their community. The concept is actually based on Oakland's First Friday, wherein you'll have galleries, artist collectives, street artists, local culinary artists, performers, musicians, dancers, DJs, poets, food trucks, and the like in one area where different people can go and support these different local artists, as well as be able to participate in the festivities and really create a cultural environment. And then, of course, we would like to have youth engagement by connecting with the local public school system and bridging the gap between the local public school system and the artists so that we can create more cultural activities and make those students feel invested within their community in and of themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last candidate, Byron, would you like to go ahead and answer that?
Yes, and thank you, just like everyone else, for the opportunity to speak to you and your members. Art and cultural significance of the West Side. We're talking about District 3. Culturally historical neighborhoods of Vine City, English Avenue, Washington Park, Hunter Hills, all the way over to Harvell Homes. When we talk about the people that have come through these neighborhoods, great orators, great singers, great painters, the arts is enriched throughout the district. So we can leverage the art and cultural significance of our community from birth, really, because artistic styling and the art start, in my opinion, at birth. Early childhood, for children to be able to express themselves, partnering with our school system to be able to do art things. As you know, people like to say the only candidate that graduated from the historic Booker T. Washington High School that had one of the best bands. But those bands actually started at a young age with children in elementary school. So just the cultural significance of the district itself gives us a wonderful opportunity to reach back to our past, to support our present, to plan a beautiful future for our children and the community. So from the very beginning, we can begin to leverage the arts community and the cultural significance of the district.
Thank you for that. And Brandon, I believe you were next to go.
Yes. As it pertains to the arts within our district, we have a lot of inequities. And as a musician and trained dancer from the Atlanta Ballet, I know that firsthand. Back in 2018, I started the conversation with the Atlanta Public Schools as it pertains to establishing a full-time dance program for Douglas High School. North Atlanta has had a program for years, Maynard Jackson, Mays High School, even Washington High School. And so as we notice is that there is an equity across the board as it pertains to our cluster schools. And so that goes back into how our neighbors are able to experience the arts within their communities. Now that program is a full-time program with a full-time dance teacher. But there was a lot of kicking and dragging and screaming and fighting that we had to do to get that implemented. So what we have to do is cultivate better connections between our major arts organizations and our school system, and also as it pertains to other opportunities that our neighbors are able to immerse themselves within the arts community. We do that by cultivating stronger legislation within the city that backs our arts programming within our parks and recs, also partnering with the school district to ensure that our students have equity. Currently right now, Mays High School has an orchestra program, but the middle school does not. So how do our Black and brown students cultivate real opportunities to gain more artistic abilities and experience that provide some educational opportunity when we don't have that equity? And the only way we can do that is by pulling in the proper partner. Sharon Story over at Atlanta Ballet. Kiona brought up Kenny Leon, who's a graduate of Clark Atlanta University, ensuring that we have an arts advisory board. And that's one of the things that my office is really aiming to do, is to ensure that with that board, we look at a larger pipeline plan of how we can engage our neighbors and residents within the arts, because we know that a lot of the first arts programs that our neighbors go to is ones of their kids. And so if their schools don't have any programming, that means that our residents aren't engaging with the arts as best as they can. And so the advisory board is going to be a main component, also leveraging legislation, and also in terms of private donating and funding to our programs as it pertains to recreation and arts centers across the city of Atlanta. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. And my apologies, I've only gave Erica 1 minute, so we're just going to circle back. Erica, if you wanted to add any additional thoughts to your response, you've got 1 more minute.
Yeah, thank you for that, Natalie. The only thing I would add, I mentioned there are so many opportunities. So I see youth engagement, civic engagement overall being enhanced by the arts community, especially as it relates to our district. But the last thing I wanted to point out, I started to talk about beautification a bit. That's something I'm very interested in for our district. We have some amazing communities from all the way to the west, Harbell Homes going to the very west, throughout the community and going north to Atlantic Station. So I'm just doing the borders. Those are not all of our communities, obviously, but around beautification there, we can leverage the arts community to look at, we have almost 30 parks and play lots in our district, but transit stations, there's so much I'd like to do to help enhance the quality of life through beautification, and that would be done perfectly with the arts community. Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you. The second question, nonprofit arts and cultural organizations and independent artists rely on public funding for support. Atlanta's nonprofits arts and cultural landscape suffers from chronic undersupport. What are your thoughts on how to solve this and who should lead those efforts? So Erica, again, we'll start with you.
Sure. So in terms of who should lead that conversation, that is a great question. In my opinion, and I look forward to working as, if elected, as a council member for this district, working hand in hand with this community and working with the experts to really nail this down and drive solutions. But I would recommend the City of Atlanta's Office of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the state. So the Georgia Council for the Arts, because I think this is a pervasive issue, not just in Atlanta, not just in Georgia for that matter, but a partnership between the city and state would be very helpful to look at the chronic undersupport and look at it from a long-term view. But I think we also need to have, so I think they should lead the conversation, but as a part of that conversation, we need to involve residents and stakeholders, the community, philanthropic partners, business, faith leaders. The arts impacts everyone. So driving solutions should be across the board while those two entities lead the conversation. But we need to look at things such as long-term funding streams. Grants are wonderful, but they can be one time. So we need to really be strategic about long-term funding, land use as well, and human resources. I think those are all contributing factors to the undersupport in this area that our partners could come together and make solutions for. Thank you.
Okay, Kiana, will go on to you.
All right. Thank you, Natalie, for the question. In my opinion, I think the community should lead this effort. The community, along with council, our neighborhoods, our businesses, stakeholders, our grassroots organizations, and we need to reach across the aisles to our school board and the school system. We need to continue to leverage our public-private partnerships and secure some of those development dollars for our art projects, developing ongoing partnerships with developers, and of course, seeking the right legal advice from experts to ensure that your partnership agreement is enforceable. I believe in working with council. Council can set aside some matching funds to support art projects within their district. You can work with Park Pride art projects that are centered around the parks for a small change grant, community building grant, legacy grant. We need to work with, partner with Fulton County. They have a Department of Cultural of Arts grant that starts from $1,000 to $50,000, and it's for community-based art projects. And the Atlanta Regional Commission has an art and cultural division now. It's relatively new. They painted a mural on the side of a school building, not in this district, but in some place in the United States, of an abandoned school, a former abandoned school, and showcase the history of the neighborhood. And also, last but not least, the City of Atlanta, our Cultural and Arts Department, they have a major arts organization grant for cultural affairs, our philanthropic communities, and just other grant opportunities from individuals within our district and the city. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Elijah, how would you answer this question?
Thank you. I think this is a cause and effect approach. The first step is to address why there's chronic undersupport. And so when we look at why there's chronic undersupport, I think there's a value add question that should be asked. And so in assessing the value add, the first thing for us is to determine the value proposition. What does it mean? Why should stakeholders invest in the music, in the arts, in the festival, in the events, in the activities? So once we can categorize and summarize how these things all lead to a cultural good and the economic prosperity of our district as well as Atlanta citywide, then I think that it's very, very easy to see why others should be invested, and then we make it worth their while. And so one of the ways that we can do that, again, similar to Erica, partnering with the Georgia Council for the Arts. Just a simple peruse of the website, anybody can see the numbers where 62.5 billion in total economic output, more than 200,000 jobs across the state. So once people start to see how we connect the cultural arts to the economic output in dollars, I think that that'll be critical in getting more stakeholders that are invested for the long term rather than just for a short stream and a short period of time. Thank you.
Wonderful. And Byron.
Yes, ma'am. This question is an easy one because it's one I have already done. While my tenure on the Atlanta Board of Education, actually the elected leadership of the ones who allocated the dollars and the community of the ones who is requesting the dollars and need the dollars actually had a conversation. And we actually spoke to each cluster to realize what they wanted their arts departments and arts divisions to look like. And so while on the board, we significantly increased the budgets of Atlanta Public Schools arts community. So the same thing can take place on council. It needs to be a collaborative between not only city council and the mayor, but Fulton County, the state and national endowment as well, because all of those entities have dollars they can allocate. But at the end of the day, it's going to take the experts, the ones that are actually in the community, to give us the advice, to give us our marching orders, to really fund the things that we need to fund. So it needs to be a collaborative effort between those who are allocating the dollars and those who actually know where their dollars need to be, because we as elected officials don't know it all, no matter what we tell you. So we will need the experts on the ground to actually give us that advice to move us forward in a collaborative manner.
Okay, thank you for that. And last but not least, Brandon.
Yes. So as it pertains to leading the charge, as pertains to the arts and the city of Atlanta, and specifically with District 3, this is something that I'm willing to lead the charge on. I received my BA from one of the largest arts colleges in the country. And the truth of the matter is that we know that the arts is underfunded, and the lack of engagement from a legislative and financial standpoint is something that the city has not matured on in comparison to cities like Chicago or New York. And so with that being said, we're gonna have to cultivate a Atlanta artist pipeline. One of the things that we know, the city of Atlanta has a thriving film and entertainment industry. And so we know that the money is pouring in as pertains to media arts, film arts, television, et cetera. But I think it's also the lack of pipelining of opportunities for organizations and artists that are consistently looking for revenue and work. And as a city that is at the helm of that industry, we have to recalibrate and reorganize how we integrate artists into that conversation. Much like how we look at our procurement office, we should look at our artists just the same. Those that are doing development within our neighborhoods, we know that they're gonna have paintings up on the walls. They're gonna have interior design. We should be pipelining better opportunities for the artists and the organizations within the city of Atlanta that actually gives them a fighting chance and a more equitable opportunity to cultivating revenue on their own terms. Because we do know that any dollars that we earmark within the city of Atlanta are gonna have a very hard time stamp as it relates to their use of funds. And that's one of the ways that we can better cultivate revenue for artists and organizations within the city of Atlanta. We just have to be a bit more purposeful and intentional as it relates to artist procurement within the city of Atlanta alongside other organizations and major corporations that are coming to the city. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Brandon. All right, so Erica, we're back to you. The next question is gig workers, and that is independent artists and creatives along with their families, were most impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic's contracted economy. What policies will you support that directly address their needs?
Mm-hmm. And this is a question that impacts many other industries as well. So we've really had to think through this as leaders. And some of what I've said in other industries is applicable here as well. I think it's very important. We are over a year, I guess a year and a half into dealing with this pandemic, and it's still going on now, but it's so important that we are swift in our responses. We obviously had to be reactive and creative with coming up with ways to support those who have been impacted. But at this point, we are deep enough in. I hope that as a city, and I assure you my responses as future council member will be to be swift on things. We can't be reactive anymore. So a strong response against COVID, in general. So to the extent that we can keep educating folks on vaccines and making them available, educating folks on COVID-19 in general and pandemics in general, that moves us closer to having venues open and workspaces open that are used by gig economy workers and those in the arts space as well. So the quicker we are about making sure that we're educating the community and doing what we can within the confines and restrictions at the state level, I think that that's going to benefit the community more swiftly. And just anything we can do at the state and federal levels to advocate for extension of funding. A lot of that has already passed, but whenever there is an opportunity, I absolutely will do so, because again, I think at this point it's critical that we are proactive with what we've learned and its impact on these communities, including the arts. Thank you.
Thank you. Kiana, you're next.
Thank you, Natalie. I believe that the policies I would support is if people can't work, then they don't have anywhere to live, and then they won't be able to eat, and they can't take care of their kids. So any policies to provide temporary or gap funding for housing, for childcare, for the sustainability of their businesses, that will allow a temporary solution until things come back online. For instance, this $80,000 grant that we secured for the mural, there's maintenance that needs to be done prior to the implementation of the mural, $30,000 worth of maintenance. So the artist needs, time. So to keep this particular job in the pipeline, there needs to be technical support to ensure that the projects are still, there. We need to find ways to move forward. Fulton County offers a small business relief fund for community-based artists that are in Fulton County and the city of Atlanta, reaching out to United Way, the Red Cross, the Atlanta Food Bank, Fountain of Hope, FACA, who's the Fulton Atlanta Community Action Authority. Because if you don't have any work, you won't be able to produce any art. So you'll need somewhere to live. You'll need to be able to pay your bills and to take care of your family and eat. So that's just my approach. Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe we're back to Elijah.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you again for the question. In regards to this question, again, starting with the cause and effect approach, one of the first things that we should do is identify the individuals who were mostly affected as part of the art community. Once we identify who those individuals are, then we should ask them what are the things that they are facing that would be something immediate and something long-term beneficial wise that could be used to assist them. Based on that assessment, then that will allow us to determine the next plan of action. In terms of the development with the gig workers, we understand that many of them, as you said earlier, are independent artists. And because they are independent artists, that means that we should help them get on the right foot. And so what that means is that we should encourage funds, whether that's helping pay for certain facilities, pay for certain materials so that they can produce their art, and then also helping provide a wider audience in terms of customer contacts, which will allow them to easily stream the revenue that they once had. So by us helping to use grants and leveraging our resources to cover the facility, to cover the merchandise, to cover whatever equipment, and therefore offshoring that cost and still allowing them to tap into their talent and share that with the world, then therefore by that notoriety, it should be a lot easier for them to generate the revenue that they need to survive and build and go forward. And then again, we should also use the COVID-19 dollars that are remaining and left over from the other moratorium and going forward from there. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least, again, Brandon.
I think I go before Brandon, Ms. Byron.
I'm so sorry about that.
That's okay. I
Byron,
didn't
you're
want to
next.
mess up your order, so I thought I'd help you out.
Apologies, please go ahead.
But I mean, that is a good question. As owner of a security company, when you talk about the gigs going away, it was a significant impact on my employees and myself as well. And COVID-19 was extraordinary event, but there are some existing things that we should have taken care of long ago that the COVID pandemic just exposed. When we talk about unemployment in this state, and when the rules come down to who are actually workers and who are contractors, and then the time it takes for you to actually get your unemployment, from the time that you're let go from a job or for a gig, and then as a contractor, you can't get unemployment unless you're established as a company, then you have to be a worker in that company. So it's a lot of things that are set up through policy, laws, and ordinances that my residents should not worry about, not when you're just trying to take care of your family. So when we're talking about policy, there are some things we can look at on the state level. And also, if we really want to get technical and go up to the national level, where a small business is looked at as 500 employees or less, you know, on the SBA definition of a small business, those are things that we as elected officials need to ensure that our residents don't have to worry about. We should be that equalizer when it comes to the people that's just trying to live every day, to ensure that the policies are in place to help them. But more importantly, when you talk about the CARES Act money that has come in and has went everywhere, in my opinion, except to the people that actually need it. When it comes to places that the city could have actually employed some of these workers to actually do some things that the city needed done. There are a lot of things that are falling apart. I would have loved to see a program where we took CARES Act money, took some of our gig workers that build stages and things of that nature to repair some of our senior citizens' homes. So it's up to us as elected officials to be creative, to keep our residents involved, and to do the right thing for them.
Okay, thank you so much for that. On to the next question. If you had to create an
Natalie,
arts culture, yes.
Natalie, I was to go last.
Oh, so sorry about that.
No, it's
Very
all right.
good.
It's been a long day. I'm right
Yes,
there with you.
yes, it has.
I'm ready to eat some dinner too.
Let's get you started. Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
And I'll make this quick and short. I've been a gig worker, still do gigs, etc., as a musician, as an artist. And so I know that the pandemic has definitely hit us the hardest. And as owning the Divine Agency and ciphering out work to artists, this has been imperiling. And so as we find out as a city, we don't have a social impact fund. That means that we have not been earmarking dollars for emergencies such as this. And so that means that we have to cultivate real legislation that pulls our private and large corporations to the table. And as a city, we have to let them know that we have to be more socially conscious for times such as these. One of the biggest things as well, too, as we attempt to assist and aid gig workers, we have to make sure that the dollars are actually rolling down to organizations that have tenure within the city, or in contrast, that we can see proof of work, because we know that they have a real heartbeat on who the actual artists are. Because what we don't want to do is to earmark dollars and then take artists through this major red tape in terms of actually getting the money, when we know that organizations like True Colors Theater, other organizations like the Atlanta Black Dance Alliance, that they have a hard temperature on those artists that are in need in real time in times such as these. And they can cultivate their own opportunities of portals that artists can be able to receive funds and opportunities to be able to live off of for the time period. So futuristic wise, we have to make sure that we have social impact funds, that we let organizations know that they have to earmark emergency fund dollars to assist gig workers that have come through their organization.
Thank you, Brandon. Next question is, if you could create an arts and culture policy for your district, what would it include? As a reminder, the City of Atlanta's last comprehensive arts and culture plan was completed in 2006, which was 15 years ago. And I'll repeat the question. If you had to create an arts and culture policy plan for your district, what would it include? As a reminder, the City of Atlanta's last comprehensive arts and culture plan was completed in 2006, which was 15 years ago. And Erica, we'll start with you.
Yes, so definitely as a part of that plan, equity, affordability, and accessibility. And I have specific points under that, but I want to make sure that every resident in District 3, from our small children and babies all the way to seniors, is able to access art within their community and not have to go far for it, and that it's equitably distributed across the district where we can, but especially across the city. That's the most important thing to me. So along with that, I also would want to make sure in this plan that we're identifying ways in the district, so for everyone in the district, to incorporate arts and culture into their daily lives. So that doesn't have to be just visiting, let's say, an arts event or art exhibit per se, or a show or a cultural event, but how can we incorporate that into our daily lives? So in my plan, I would look at that strategically. That's a high level point that I'd like to work with the community on to see how we can address it in our daily lives, but affordability as well. So I want to make sure that arts and culture events are not just events, it could be exhibits and things are affordable to folks in our district. That's extremely important. And just expanding affordability in general. So for our artists, the workspaces that they are working in, the venues that they need, making sure that we are consulting with that community to understand what affordability means to them, and that we're making that happen in District 3. So I would love to work with the community and our creatives at large to implement a specific plan for District 3 that includes elements such as what I just mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you. And we're going to move on to Kiana for that. Kiana, how would you respond to this question?
Thank you, Natalie. My answer would be a simple 4-prong approach. The first element would be community, first and foremost. It's very essential. Having our community experts there, our community leaders, parents, our seniors, the schools, the artists, and maybe review the plan from 2006 and pick up some elements that we can use, utilize what we can, and move on from the things that we can't. The second thing would be ongoing conversations, regardless regarding shaping policy, allowing the community to have input, policy writers, include council, different artists, our grassroots organizations, businesses, our schools, and our developers. This is the educator coming out of me. Just use a basic, simple writing process: pre-write, research, draft, revise, edit, and proofread. The third approach would be collaboration. We'll have to have ongoing collaboration with our public and private partnerships. Developers, we should ensure that when developers come into our neighborhoods that they support our art programs. You should include your art projects in your CDP, which is a comprehensive development plan. If it's a jazz festival, art festival, jewelry festival, West Side Music Festival, plan. And I believe that the new incoming mayor and the council and the school board should all work in tandem. There may be room or some resources for a feasibility study to make sure that all of our I's are dotted and our T's are crossed. And the last approach would be connectivity, connect, because working together works. Thank you.
Thank you. Elijah, how do you respond to that?
Thank you again for the question. Similar to my other responses, I have a cause and effect approach to policy and proposals. And so what that means for me is the first question that we have to ask, what is it that we're trying to accomplish with this plan? What are the long-term effects that we would like to see by implementing an arts and culture plan? And so one of the things that I think is intimately tied to arts and culture is the crime. So often we hear how crime is one of the biggest issues in our cities. And one of the ways that we can reduce the crime is through opportunity. And so that will be one of the points that I would harp on from a policy perspective, and then work backwards and say, okay, so how can we create opportunity through arts and culture? As a practicing musician since I was in the 5th grade, also was a drum major at Fort Valley State University for several years, I recognize the importance of the band programs, the music programs, the chorus programs, specifically when it comes to when we're talking about funding, making sure that parents, similar to how my parents were, they were not able to afford the instruments. So like the saxophones, the clarinets, the baritones, the tubas, oftentimes many students would like to participate in a band, but because they can't afford certain instruments, they can't. So one of the first things that we can do is allocate funding toward the band programs, also toward other events, other festivals, where a lot of the students who are creatives that create their own shoes or create their own apparel brands, we can be offering grants toward that merchandise and helping support those expenses. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Elijah. Byron, how do you respond?
Yes, ma'am. Anytime you're talking about a plan, we as elected officials must make sure that it is inclusive, that we involve everyone. So that means all of the individual neighborhoods and artists that are in District 3, as well as the organizations, the municipal organizations as well, our school system, our county and our state. And then we sit down. To talk about exactly what art and cultural affairs is to us. What does it mean to us? Well, in District 3, that is easy. We're miles ahead because there are always things that we can talk about in the past. But arts and culture should be to fuel the future. So finding that gap in that space that we can bridge that gap between the past and the present and the future is what that plan should also design. But more importantly, inside of that plan, because what you will find inside of District 3, well, the most planned out district in the world, there's money. You know, we talk about planning what we want to see and how we want to do it, but no one has attached money to it. So inside that plan, we will always talk about the funding stream as well. This is how we're going to fund this want, or this is how we're going to fund this need. And if we do it inclusively, everyone that has their hands on the purse strings will actually know what the community is expecting, what we want to do, how much it'll cost, and what it would take to actually fund it. And that's how we begin to move the projects forward. So to be inclusive of everyone, to identify what the community sees as arts, and also more importantly, to ensure that the funding is there to make it happen, will only be the tip of the plan that we begin to develop together.
Thank you. And Brandon, how do you respond to this question?
Yes. So a well-developed plan as pertains to the arts for District 3 has to be a very holistic approach as we look at ensuring, because even right now, the city isn't paying artists to teach art within our parks and recs. That's one of the main components that we have to develop as we look at a more comprehensive plan to ensure that at all of our parks and recs, that there are opportunities for artists to work, to teach whatever their mediums are. The second component is we have to partnership with Atlanta Public Schools in branding a 0 to 100 arts campaign. That means that every school with equity throughout the city of Atlanta should have a band program, a fine and visual arts, orchestra, also dance, and any other artistic components that we would like to add to that, and what dollars have to be earmarked in partnership with the school district to ensure that the labor force is there, but also the opportunities for young people to learn. The next component is that we're going to have to enhance the number of festivals that we're having within District 3. We know that the Home Depot backyard has become our backyard as pertains to events and opportunities. But to look at how we can better cultivate events that have urban focuses, that at some point have been more so poignant to financially support Piedmont Park versus supporting our side of town. We can look at that in better collaboration with Clark Atlanta, Morehouse, Spelman, as we know that on a yearly basis, they have over 200,000 alums and students coming to town to engage. This immersive opportunity allows for us to engage our residents and neighbors from a more holistic artist lens. We fund this by looking at our tourism budget, looking at other permissible funds where we can earmark dollars to provide funding for this plan itself. But we know that the dollars are there. We just haven't been organizing them to implement intentional and purposeful legislation and policies. Thank you.
Thank you. And our last question. Inequities exist within Atlanta's arts and culture community in terms of how arts organizations are funded and which organizations receive funding, as well as which neighborhoods in the city are more likely to have arts and cultural offerings. Share your ideas on how those inequities might be addressed and who should lead those efforts. So Erica, we'll start with you.
Yes, that's a great question, and one that's a bit personal to me as we talk about inequities, because as a council member, I am a future council member if elected. That is something I am zoned into, eliminating inequities in all areas, and the arts is one. It's no different. Growing up, just on a quick personal note, again, growing up, my family is very into the arts and artists themselves in different ways. That did not trickle down to me, unfortunately, but I certainly love and patronize the arts. But my mother would take us, we didn't have accessible artistic events, maybe where we lived in certain areas of town. She would take the time to take us across town and make trips out of town, even just so we would have exposure to various forms of art that we didn't have in our neighborhood. So that's something I would like to tackle, again, on a personal note, for the children who are growing up in our city who are not able to have access that they should to certain artistic events and things of that nature. So in terms of recommendations here, I think, again, leading this effort now with community input, I think the Office of Cultural Affairs and the state's office Council for the Arts should help lead a conversation that includes residents and other stakeholders to even commission. I know we are overplanned and overstudied in the city of Atlanta, but this is definitely worthy of another one to get a real view of where the inequities exist, what neighborhoods and districts are being hit the hardest by this, so that we can be strategic in developing a plan that we can act on that has data that shows where we're seeing these inequities and how we can address them. So that would be the first step that I would recommend to address this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Kiana, how do you respond to this question?
My response is to use the Culture and Arts Commissioner in that department. The first thing would be is a feasibility study, and such as Erica said, to see who needs what, when, where, and why, who's been hit the hardest. Different people need different things at different times. So the feasibility study is definitely needed. And I researched the Seattle's program for supporting cultural space and development, and I like how they were geared towards eliminating institutional racism through their program and their policies and their practices. We should also involve the community in this coalition. In this department, we would have to work with developers to ensure that our arts and culture are influenced in all the new buildings that they're building, their projects, create other programs under this organization that will protect and preserve our current art, and support the grassroots organizations that are already doing the work as far as finding space, supplies, gigs, their next job, so that they can be successful and utilize our local talent. I don't think we have to shop around and go to, different areas or different parts of the United States. We have a lot of local talent here, even some as are on this panel right here, such as Brandon. And by the way, full disclosure, Frederick Douglass High School has the best band. Okay, Frederick Douglass High School has the best band. I digress.
I second that motion.
But thank you, though.
Thank you for that, Kiana. Elijah, how do you respond to this question?
Thanks again for the question. The first step is to conduct an assessment to identify the problem. And by identifying the problem, then we can have a balanced approach on a solution. How do we determine what the neighborhoods have and don't have? Once we determine what the neighborhoods don't have, specifically areas such as Define City or English Avenue, then we can say, okay, what do we have to gain by investing in these particular communities? I think that that's a very critical point, because it's one thing to point at what somebody doesn't have, but it's another to say, similar to stocks, if you invest in this doing X, Y, and Z for the long term, this is the potential benefit or potential gain. And one of those key things is not only in a culturally developed community, but one that is economically empowered, because opportunities will be provided to the residents that are there, which will also have an indirect and direct approach on the reflection of the crime. Next, similar to Baltimore's Black Arts District, the city should provide grants and tax incentives to address these equities by assisting local businesses and organizations that contribute to the cultural curation in our city. So similar to how many businesses receive tax incentives for our formerly incarcerated individuals, and that lead to employment and apprenticeship opportunities, the same structure should apply when it comes to the arts and our youth, in terms of them having apprenticeship opportunities to work under local artists. And therefore, we're able to allocate funds within our budget toward that, and people will see the long-term gain from that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Elijah. Byron, you're next. How do you respond to this question?
Yes, ma'am. It's hard to talk about feasibility studies and things of that nature, because art is something that is personal. How do we, or who are we to come into a community and say, this is art to you? So without that conversation of actually sitting down and identifying what each community actually describes as art or feel as art, then we're just being like everyone else that has come in District 3 and done things to the community instead of with the community. So the first step I would do is actually pull together the community and the art community of District 3 to have a holistic conversation, to see what is out there, what the residents like, what the organizations like. Then we're also talk to our school system as well, because they have a certain obligation, I believe, to expose children to art and cultural affairs as well. So it's a holistic conversation, just like my answer to the previous question, that must take place for us to fully understand. And then once things are identified, as a collaborative, if we get together and say, we are not exposing our children to opera, we're not exposing our children to fine art, then and only then the municipalities step in to ensure that those organizations that can provide additional funding, or those organizations who may have the ability to create additional funds for themselves, because there's a quid pro quo for each community. There should be art throughout the city for everyone to enjoy. So to answer the question, to have a holistic conversation, to understand what each community thinks is art, and then for us to fill in the gaps of what they need.
Thank you for that, Byron. And finally, Brandon, how do you respond?
The major inequities as it pertains to funding, in contrast to Black and Brown organizations versus their counterparts, is very vast. And a lot of that speaks towards the lack of acumen, capacity, labor force, and also true resources. So the city's cultural affairs office has to lead the charge. And I would definitely support a Grow Like Me cohort initiative. And much like Invest Atlanta is teaching and providing information to those that are interested in growing as pertains to real estate development, we should be providing that same opportunity to our arts organizations within the city. I can speak for myself, even with the Divine Agency, the city has allowed for us to go through procurement opportunities. However, the city has never called a meeting on a standing conversation to corral organizations around the table to let us know what they're truly looking for and what that process looks like and the information and the acumen that we need to be successful in that. And so that's one of the components that we're going to have to pull the High Museum of Art, Center for Puppetry Arts, Atlanta Ballet, the Fox Theater, other major organizations to that table to allow them to lend their information to Black and Brown organizations that are scrapping or that are reaching for scraps, actually. And so we in turn change that narrative for them that they're able to apply for national grants because now they have the acumen and resources and information and knowledge. And at minimum, even a contact to ask questions to find out what that could look like and what that feels like and how to best implement and use of funds. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Thank you for these very thoughtful responses to these questions. It looks like we're almost at about time, but we do, I don't know if we have some time for maybe 1 or 2 questions for people on the call. Collins, what do you think?
Sure. We didn't have any questions come in from our viewers, which is completely fine. So that does conclude our time together today. I just echo Natalie. Thank you so much for your time, your thoughtful answers to all of these questions. And we just really, really appreciate you all joining us today, both our candidates and those out in the audience and those who are going to join us watching the recording. So thank you for your time. Please remember to go vote on November the 2nd for one of the District 3 candidates, and best of luck to everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.